the ellipse will narrow again. But again, you unproblematically see that ellipse, not as an ellipse, but as a circle. You see the top of the coffee cup is circular. And what Boehm's saying is that, I guess the software of our brains or our bodies he's talking about, but through some kind of process, the visual information that we're getting to do with that changing shape is combined with the other information that's provided by our proprioceptive sense, the weight of the coffee cup, the sense of movement, the non-conscious awareness of the relationships in space of our bodies to the cup and the angle of incidence of the sight lines from our eyes, all those kind of information is kind of coalesced. So we unproblematically see the top of the coffee cup as circular, even though at no point does a circle make itself evident to us in terms of an image on the retina or anything like that. So again, we seem to be non-consciously, without any extra cognitive work, occupying a position in space which we're not physically occupying. Our phenomenal consciousness sees the circle, which is only actually visible from a point, a theoretical point, somewhere above the coffee cup. So we're again distributed across space on some level. A third source of evidence is some of the work that Eve Sweets has done, and I haven't read this in the original, I've only seen some videos of hers on YouTube, but she's talking about viewpoint in gesture and language. And one of the things that she points to is how we use language to talk about where we are and to kind of arrange things in conceptual space. And she gives the example of being on the telephone. And if you're on the phone to someone, she says, and they say, I could do with somebody to talk to, can you come over? You probably say, yeah, I'll come right over. You don't say, I'll go right over, even that makes physical sense. You say, I'll come right over. So conceptually, we locate ourselves alongside the person at the other end of the telephone in the space that they're at, and then kind of invite ourselves over. I'll come over, we say. If there's somebody else with us in the room that we are in, having this telephone conversation, we would turn to them and say, I'm going over to see such and such. So, within the space of a very few seconds, in the same breath, we can place ourselves cognitively alongside the person at the other end of the telephone line, and also be in the room that we're receiving the call, and make statements to people in the room with us about where we are, where we're going, and so on. So again, in that, and she gives lots of other examples to do with how we array ourselves in space cognitively, and seems to suggest, I think, that phenomenal consciousness is constantly occupying spaces that's either really occupied by other people or could be occupied by other people. We keep putting ourselves alongside other people, seeing things through other people's viewpoints, combining other people's viewpoints to our own viewpoints, and so on, in that kind of distributed way. So again, I think that's evidence that our sense of who we are and where we are isn't simply this dimensionless point at the center of our center of this apparent world that we're occupying, but is also distributed, is blurred, distributed across space. The last example is simply scientific objectivity, or empirical objectivity, although it's not often, or it is occasionally spoken about in the philosophy of science, but certainly within science itself it's not usually acknowledged. But the acclaim in philosophy of science is that what we're trying to do in making empirical claims is to occupy a kind of space in which the person is kind of individually absent, or alternatively is omnipresent. Thomas Nagel calls this the view from nowhere. That it's a viewpoint, but it's not a viewpoint that's any one place, it's every place. I think you'll also find that in some of the conventions of scientific writing, the adopting of the passive voice, for example, when there is no I present in the language, you wouldn't say I did this, you would say this was done. The implication, although it's a bit clumsy, but the implication being that anyone could be doing it, standing anywhere, in any particular cultural context. There's no individual viewpoint from which that kind of consciousness, if that's the right word, is applicable. Okay. So I guess what I'm looking at with all of those things is that this idea of phenomenal consciousness being spatially located at one point in space, certainly I experience that as the default setting. I do experience things as receding into the distance. I do see things as slipping out of my grasp. I do see things as diminishing in size as they approach the horizon, and I do see things as dropping off the horizon when they get too far. And I do think that as a kind of map, metaphorical map, from which other kinds of organizations of knowledge, for example, could be drawn, is absolutely crucial. However, it seems to me that there are also other kinds of maps which are absolutely embedded within phenomenal consciousness. They're not simply scientific hypotheses. They're not alien concepts. There are other spaces that we occupy simultaneously, from the 3 inches apart consciousness of depth of perception to the changing ellipses at the top of coffee cups, which we know to be round, to the multiple viewpoints embedded within language and intersubjectivity, and the intersubjectivity of scientific empiricism.